Fariba is an Afghan-American journalist. She's also the author of the book Opium Nation about the drug trade in Afghanistan. Fariba, welcome to the program. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you one question about your country's history before we look ahead to the future. Joe Biden spoke on Tuesday. He was again defending the US withdrawal, and he spoke about malfeasance and corruption, a cloud, he said, under which former President Ashraf Ghani fled the country. It's almost as if the US president is saying that actually with better governance, Afghanistan wouldn't have been in this situation. Is he right?
I think it's complicated. The US was very much involved in this corruption. It was fed on dollars coming from America and the international community. So just blaming the Afghan government and not taking responsibility is absolutely wrong. But yes, Afghanistan's been an impoverished country for decades, at war for decades, and that breeds corruption. And that's what you saw all these years. With more money coming in, the corruption skyrocketed, the monitoring was not done properly, and everybody was making money off of the international funds that were coming in. I did a report called Afghanistan, Inc. in 2006, looking at American subcontractors and contractors the corruption was at all levels, let me tell you. It wasn't just on the Afghan side of things.
Yeah, and of course that seeps into the population who begin to think, hold on, is the democratic government we've elected the right one? It might change people's opinions even by 1 or 2% about the new thing that's coming in. And a lot of the vox pops that I've heard from Afghanistan are of people saying, at least now we can be responsible as Afghans for the country's future. And we don't have to have this occupation of foreign forces, more than 40 years, the Soviets and then the Americans. So as you look ahead, what are your hopes for properly inclusive government? You've got people like the former warlord who's been alleged to have carried out multiple war crimes, Abdul Rashid Dostum, who's saying that he wants to be involved in the talks. You've got Ahmed Shah Massoud, the former warrior's son, saying that he wants to be involved in the talks. Are they likely to be included? And is there likely to be a truly inclusive government as possibly other countries see inclusivity?
It's hard to say right now. It's really hard to predict what the Taliban are going to do because I don't think they even know. And that's partly why this process of forming a government is taking so long. Nobody predicted that they would be able to take over Afghanistan so quickly. And I think the Afghan government doing what they did and the president just leaving really surprised everyone. And so an inclusive government with old warlords who were problematic, including Hekmatyar, who was known as the Butcher of Kabul, or even Dostum, who's been accused of many crimes, it can be just equally problematic. But then if you just leave the Taliban in charge, they don't have the expertise. Who are they going to call on to come and do the job of technocrats who almost everyone has left? So I'm curious to know, just like everyone else, what this new government is going to look like.
It's a country made up of tribes. The Pashtuns, they comprise the majority of the Taliban. There's something about Pashtun culture which is very inward-looking. Some analysts have said that actually that inward-lookingness is going to be the thing that will satisfy the West in terms of Afghanistan not becoming a new breeding ground for terror, although that's not what happened, of course, 20-odd years ago with Al-Qaeda being there. How much are the Taliban going to have to learn about actually engaging with the outside world and not doing that Pashtun thing of just leave us be?
Yeah, you know, it's very curious to me what they're going to do because they've been fighting. That's all they know how to do. Now they're given the responsibility of governing 30 million people. How are they going to do it? Who are they going to call on? I mean, what we're seeing, the foot soldiers on the ground are doing what they were doing 25 years ago. From my hometown, Herat, women are reporting to me, women journalists are hiding. They've gone, in some cases, door to door. They've killed the family of one journalist. They've burned the books of an Islamic scholar that I value very much. And these kinds of actions are not, they're not going to gain the people's trust whatsoever. But I do think it's important, and they do know this, that they can't go back to 20 years. They have to reform. But let's see what happens.
In terms of the economic crisis that is pending and growing, there's 9 billion of reserves, US reserves, that the Americans have frozen. The World Bank is not providing finance at the moment. The IMF is not providing finance. What happens if the Taliban don't get the money? And so this is a country where about 40% of its GDP has come from foreign assistance. Will the Taliban go back to selling drugs or continue selling drugs if they don't get the money?
They will continue selling drugs. They made money off of the trafficking all along. from their first reign of terror to now. What's going to happen is they will continue to do so illicitly. I don't think that's going to stop with or without aid money. Whether aid money comes in or not will be, but I think that aid money should be contingent on human rights. That's the only leverage we have right now. How do we get the Taliban to treat people with respect, specifically women? And I think that aid money is the only way to do so. That's the only leverage we have.
Just finally, again, sort of looking back to be able to look to the future, what are the most important gains that Afghanistan has made since the Americans invaded? And what are you fearing will be lost the most?
Right now, women's rights. And I mean, I'm an Afghan woman. I lived there half of my life. It's infuriating. It's scary what's happening. Imagine being told, you know, that you can't wear what you want. You can't say what you want. You can't leave your house. All of the gains that have been made in the last 20 years, specifically in urban areas. There is an urban-rural divide, and we need to recognize that. But urban areas internationally have been the centers of progress. And so that has been lost. Women are now threatening to commit suicide in my city. They're hiding in their basements from fear. Some of it is self-censorship, some of it is real. And you also, let's talk about gains in the media. You had Tolo TV, you had so many different TV stations and radio programs, and those journalists have all now exited the country. Many, many more things. But was it sustainable? We can see that it wasn't.
Fariba, thank you so much indeed for coming in. Really, really interesting to hear your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.